but the next day I vanished. From that day onwards, it was as if I had disappeared from his life. Only because I had time traveled 10 years into the future. When I opened my eyes again, a child was lying on the edge of my bed, calling me dad in a soft voice. My heart skipped a beat. I thought I had married my high school sweetheart. Little did I expect that soon after, in the storage room, I would find a shattered wedding photo of my wife 10 years later. To my surprise, she was not my high school crush, but a childhood friend who had grown up alongside me. When I woke up, I found myself lying on an unfamiliar bed. After fiddling with the fruit-shaped device by the bedside, I realized I seemed to have time traveled 10 years into the future. Just as I stood dazed and confused, a tiny figure suddenly scampered in. I immediately pretended to be asleep, lying still. The footsteps slowly approached, and then, a soft little hand rested on my forehead. A childish voice babbled on. "What did you eat recently? What did you play?" As I wondered about my relationship with this child, his next words made me open my eyes in shock. "Dad," he said, "you've been sick for days. Why haven't you woken up? You don't like Fan Fan, but Fan Fan misses you so much. Dad, please wake up." The kid called me Dad. I opened my eyes wide. At the bedside was a little girl who bore a passing resemblance to my childhood self. She looked at me with a startled expression. Before I could say anything, the child had scampered away in a flash. Oh my God, what on earth is going on? Just last night, the campus beauty accepted my confession of love. I didn't even get to hold her hand. Yet when I opened my eyes, the child is already so grown up. After the kid ran away, I immediately called my buddy Chen Haonan, hoping to understand the situation. I don't know what happened in these 10 years. My phone has so little information, it's pitiful. Many of my old friends have vanished without a trace from my contacts list. The phone rang for a long time before Chen Haonan finally answered. Before I could speak, he started cursing at me. "You bastard, you still have the nerve to call me?" I scratched my head, not knowing why he was so furious. I could only say, "Old Chen, something happened to me. Can you come over?" Chen Haonan is my childhood buddy and best friend, the one I trusted most growing up. I still remember one New Year's, when the neighbor's kid mischievously threw firecrackers down the well cover. It exploded, blowing the cover off. Chen Haonan and I were closest. If he hadn't shielded me, my eyes would have been blown out. But because of that, he ended up in the hospital for half a month. Seeing me stammer, unable to speak, Chen Haonan grew impatient. "Chen Zi, are you sick again?" Reminiscing about Liu Ruyan, and calling to curse me out. Liu Ruyan was the campus beauty who accepted my confession yesterday. Someone Chen Haonan had never met. It seems a lot really did happen in these 10 years. I told Chen Haonan that it couldn't be explained over the phone. He had to come see me in person. After cursing for a while, he agreed. As soon as I hung up, an auntie came knocking. Now who could this be? I waited silently for her to speak first. She tentatively asked, "Sir, you're awake. Would you like something to eat?" Ah, the household auntie. It seems 10 years later I've really made it big. I nodded slightly. Soon, an array of exquisite dishes was laid before me. Never did I imagine that 10 years on, I'd be living the life I once dreamed of. I tentatively asked the auntie about my wife. She looked perplexed, saying, "Madam is away on a business trip, not returning until next month." Unsure of who my wife was, I didn't pry further, lest I give myself away, so I just picked up my chopsticks and dug in. Fair to say, they were all my favorites. "This is me." When out of the corner of my eye I noticed the kid peeking in. Realizing this could be my daughter, my eyes lit up. I waved her over. "Come here, little one." She flinched, timidly approaching my bedside. Why does this child seem afraid of me? I scratched my head. I asked the child in a gentle voice, "Little one, what is your name? How old are you this year?" The chubby little face of the child was filled with grievance. He seemed not to understand. How could a father not remember his child's name? "Dad, my name is Chen Zhaoxiao. My nickname is Fan Fan. I'm 4.5 years old this year." I continued asking, "Fan Fan, let me test you. What is your mother's name?" "My mom's name is Fan Fan. You should go downstairs to study now. Don't disturb the gentleman's rest." An auntie suddenly appeared at the door, interrupting Fan Fan's answer. "Sorry, sir. I didn't watch Fan Fan. I'll take her downstairs now." The auntie timidly came and took Fan Fan away. I was a bit confused about the situation, so I just nodded. Since I woke up, this auntie's attitude was very strange, as if I were some ferocious beast. Since I couldn't find out about my wife, I decided to look for clues myself. The bedroom was lavishly decorated, but there were no wedding photos, no traces of another person living there. It seemed the couple's relationship was not harmonious. Since they had already reached the point of separate rooms but had not divorced, it was likely due to issues dividing property. As I walked out of the room, I realized this was a two-story small villa. Downstairs, Fan was quietly leaning by the floor-to-ceiling window, playing with puzzles. Sunshine spilled across the floor. His eyelashes drooped, the picture of an obedient girl, not a hint of the mischievousness typical of children. I guessed it was likely due to his parents' relationship issues, leaving him with an unsettled feeling inside. Thinking of this, I rushed over in a few strides. "What is my good daughter playing? Dad will join you." Fan's eyes went wide, and he immediately stood up, as if at attention. He called out, "Dad." I ruffled his little head. He happily nuzzled my hand. I felt a twinge in my heart. I could probably guess that 10 years later, I didn't really like this child, neglecting to care for him, but luckily Fan was young and didn't hold grudges. I played with him for a bit, and he quickly became happy, starting to share his puzzles with me. Fan, do you only have puzzles to play with? When I was your age, not to mention all the different balls, I always had Ultramen and little cars. Fan gave me a cautious look, saying, "Dad used to complain other toys were too noisy and would get angry." My mind was filled with confusion. I had always been known for my good temper. How could I randomly get angry at my own daughter? What was wrong with me 10 years from now? Just as I was fuming, the doorbell rang. Chen Haonan had arrived. When Chen Haonan entered, I was somewhat taken aback. Was this still my unkempt and shabby-looking childhood friend? That loser appearance of his? He was wearing glasses, dressed in a suit, with an overall air of a social elite. I exaggeratedly widened my eyes and exclaimed, "Whoa!" Chen Haonan gave me a cold look. Fan, however, seemed quite familiar with him. Immediately running up and calling out, "Uncle Chen," Chen Haonan patted Fan's little head, telling me, "Let's go upstairs, to the study." I hastily led him into the study. Before he could speak, I hurriedly recounted the whole story. After listening, Chen Haonan frowned and scrutinized me. He then posed a soul-searching question. "How do you know you've time-traveled, and not just lost your memory?" "Chen, I remember the last meal before time-traveling. It was chicken leg rice at the school cafeteria. I ate the chicken legs. I remember I had just taken an exam 2 days before time-traveling, and I still remember the questions. If I'd just lost my memory, there's no way I'd remember such details from 10 years ago." Chen Haonan let out a cold laugh, but didn't say anything. As childhood friends, who grew up wearing the same pants, he understood me as well as he understood himself. Feeling embarrassed, I scratched my head and said, "Okay, fine." The day before, I had just confessed to Liu Ruyan, and we became a couple. Chen Haonan's expression instantly turned unpleasant. He called me an idiot, then told me in a rambling way about what had happened in the past 10 years. Apparently, I really did have an illness 10 years later, bidirectional affective disorder. And the reason I fell ill was because my ex-girlfriend, the school belle Liu Ruyan, cheated on me. Said that after Liu Ruyan and I got together, she pretended to be devoted to me on the surface, but was actually keeping other men on the side. She was even hitting on Chen Haonan behind my back. By the time he realized something was off with me, it was already too late for me. Later, Liu Ruyan falsely accused Chen Haonan of harassing her. Blinded by love, I immediately turned against Chen Haonan, even punching him several times. I became Liu Ruyan's loyal lapdog, but at 27 years old, Liu Ruyan kicked me to the curb, and her new boyfriend she cheated with just happened to be my college roommate. After hearing all this, I sat on the sofa, eyes glazed over. Damn, that's too tragic. Being a lapdog until you have nothing left, and ending up with a mental illness. Then what about my current wife? I suddenly recalled the person overlooked in the story. Chen Haonan looked at me, pausing before saying, "It's Lin Kinks." What? I would never have dreamed that 10 years later, I'd actually marry Lin Kinks. I started doubting if I was dreaming. Chen Haonan and Lin Kinks. We were like childhood sweethearts growing up together. The three of us lived in the same building, went to the same school. Lin Kinks was the model child from a young age. Not only beautiful, her character and dedication to learning were beyond reproach. In our residential area, you could find her everywhere. As she grew a little older, Lin Kinks became even more breathtakingly beautiful. I'm not saying I never had any improper thoughts about her, but I always felt I wasn't good enough for her. And there were too many guys who liked Lin Kinks. I even helped other guys pass her love letters to conceal my secret admiration for her. I still remember those days after passing the love letters. Lin Kinks would give me the cold shoulder, so later, even if she showed me some special attention, I just took it as the affection between childhood friends. Moreover, she went abroad right after graduation. Now Chen Haonan tells me that Lin Kinks married me. This shock is as unbelievable as the Chinese team qualifying for the World Cup and winning the championship. In the blink of an eye, another question crossed my mind. Old Chen's son Fangfang is 4.5 years old. I broke up with Liu Ruyan when I was 27. Doesn't that mean I seamlessly transitioned as well? Chen Haonan gave me a look, his expression saying, "You rascal, you're aware of this." He said we had a falling out back then. I only heard the news from others. You and Lin Kinks were caught in bed by Liu Ruyan. So Fangfang must have been conceived then. How's that possible? Lin Kinks isn't that kind of girl. Even if I lost my mind, Lin Kinks would never be so casual. Chen Haonan said, I don't know the details, but it seems Liu Ruyan wanted to break up first. However, you adamantly refused. Then she caught you and Lin Kinks. So she took advantage of it, but knowing Liu Ruyan's character, it's also possible she used some despicable means. My vision went black. No wonder there were only traces of me living alone in this room. If Lin Kinks and I really had a child out of wedlock, she must hate me to the core. Old Chen, what should I do? My dream has turned into a nightmare. Chen Haonan patted my shoulder. Be good to Kinks and Fangfang. All these years, you've been too cold to them. After seeing Chen Haonan off, I sat on the sofa, deep in thought. Lin Kinks is away on a trip, not sure when she'll be back. Since I married her, I have to take responsibility. Even if she hates me, I made some notes, a plan to win my wife back. But after so many years, I don't know if her preferences have changed. But Lin Kinks still hasn't returned. Meanwhile, Fangfang's preschool has reopened. Actually, elite preschools like his don't need to close for holidays. But most kids come from affluent families, and many parents want time to travel with them. Remembering Fangfang playing puzzles alone downstairs, I felt a sharp pang in my heart. I decided to take him out to play in a couple days. At dinner that night, Fangfang sat kicking his little legs, telling me about preschool. During dinner time, Fangfang sat on a chair, swinging her little bucket, telling me about her time in kindergarten. After a few days of being together, she was no longer as afraid of me. Rarely, when it was time to sleep, she asked to join me. She wore her dinosaur-patterned pajamas, lying obediently beside me. Dad, tell me a story. I picked up a book. A long time ago, there was a Snow-White princess. After the story ended, Fanfan smiled and said, Mom is the most beautiful. Mom is the Snow-White princess. Fanfan will marry Mom when I grow up. Lin Kinks really looked like a princess, but Mom already has Dad, so Fanfan can't marry Mom. Unexpectedly, as soon as I finished Fanfan's mood suddenly became very low. Come to think of it, after I time traveled here, I had never heard Fanfan mention Lin Kinks on her own. Could it be that Lin Kinks treated her badly? So I tentatively asked, Fanfan, do you miss your mom? Fanfan cautiously looked at me and nodded. Then tell me about your mom, Fanfan. Little kids don't think too much. They'll just say whatever comes to mind. But as she described more, my expression grew darker and darker. The Chen Zi 10 years later, you're really something, aren't you? You've learned cold violence, especially towards Lin Kinks. Daddy, what's wrong? Fanfan tugged at my sleeve. I composed my expression. Daddy didn't eat dinner. Let's go to sleep. The next day, when the nanny dropped Fanfan off at school, I casually asked about our wedding photo. The nanny hesitantly said it was in the storage room. After they left, I immediately went to search the storage room. After a while, I finally saw the dusty photo in a corner. Even the frame was shattered. In the photo, I looked expressionless, while Lin Kinks smiled beside me. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. How ugly! I had never seen myself look so ugly before. I moved to flip the photo over. If Lin Kinks was willing to give me another chance, I wanted to take her for new wedding photos. But I accidentally knocked over a box beside it. Picking it up, I realized it contained the little notes I passed to Lin Kinks in school, even an unsent love letter. I didn't expect Lin Kinks to have kept all these things. Didn't that mean she still had some feelings for me? But thinking of how I treated her 10 years later, I felt like punching my future self. To have such a wonderful wife and daughter. Yet you were obsessed with Liu Ruyan. You really were blind. After deciding to make it up to Fanfan and Lin Kinks, I started picking up and dropping off Fanfan at kindergarten every day. At the kindergarten gate, teachers led groups of little kids. Children seemed to have a special ability, spotting their parents in a crowd instantly. Her eyes lit up when she spotted me, waddling over like a little duck. She looked up at me, her little face flushed, saying, "Thank you, Dad, for picking me up." My heart melted instantly. I picked up Fan Fan and said, "Daddy's good girl. From now on, Daddy will pick you up every day." Fan Fan nodded happily. At that moment, a little girl ran over and tugged at my clothes, asking,
I nodded.
"Uncle,
The
are
girl
you
sized me
Fan
up
Fan's
and
dad?"
complimented.
But
"Well,
how come
Uncle,
you never
you're
picked
so
up Fan
handsome."
Fan before?
Before
I
I
could
could
respond,
respond,
Fan Fan doesn't have
my
a
clothes.
dad.
The girl
Let
seemed
her
to
dad
realize
say
she
yes
hadn't
anymore
spoken
and
and
looked
looked
flustered
from now on.
before.
I
I'll
was
pick
busy
up and
with
drop
dropping
off
the
Fan
content
Fan every
every
day.
day. Gossiping
Little
about
friend.
others isn't good
Then I
behavior.
looked at Fan Fan and said,
You can
"If
probably
anyone
tell
says
them
your
that
dad
again.
loves you very much and has never abandoned you." Fan Fan wiped her tears with her little hands and nodded. After we got home, Fan Fan
So I
still
bought
seemed
her
down
lots of
and
snacks.
promised to give her a big gift on her birthday. Fan Fan looked at me expectantly and said,
"What? That's
Lin
great.
Kinks is coming
Mom
back."
said she'll be
I
back
felt
too.
anxious
Lin
yet
Kinks had
anticipatory.
always been the moon
goddess
lovers
in
admired.
everyone's eyes, and
This
now
feeling
she
was
was my
truly
lawful
nuanced.
wife. Soon it was Fan Fan's birthday, and she was
Unfortunately,
unprecedentedly
the
excited.
weather was uncooperative.
It started pouring buckets
Just
in the
as Lin
afternoon.
Kinks'
flight was arriving. I had planned to pick her up and grab my car
but
keys,
then
realized I couldn't drive 10
I
years
silently
ago. Breathed a sigh of relief.
toward
I
Lin
seemed
Kinks.
to have an inexplicable anxiety. I called Fan Fan, who was staring wistfully out the window,
prepared a
over
birthday
hoping to
lunch.
make up for
Gifts,
neglecting her
no matter
previous
how
birthdays.
sensible.
Fan
She
Fan
soon
was still
became
a child
immersed
in the joy of new toys. When Lin Kinks entered, Fan Fan and I were playing with a remote
have to
control
say,
car. Toys made 10 years later were really exquisite.
You said just
"Daddy,
one lap,
it's my
little
turn to
girl.
drive. Daddy will give
We
it to you
instinctively
after
looked
this round."
towards
the door when we heard it open. Outside was a torrential downpour. Lin Kinks emerged from the wind and rain, her lady's suit half
Mom,
soaked. Fan Fan excitedly
Lin
ran
Kinks
over.
caressed
Fan Fan's little face.
Our eyes
then
met
looked
across
up at
the
me.
space.
I felt like an awkward teenager, not knowing what to do with
But
my
Lin
hands
Kinks
and
leaned
feet.
in
and whispered in my ear, "I missed you so much." At that moment, I could no longer hold back
Lin
and embraced
Kinks,
her tightly.
I missed
you too. Unfortunately, the weather was uncooperative. It started pouring buckets
Just
in the
as Lin
afternoon.
Kinks'
flight was arriving. I had planned to pick her up and grab my car
but
keys,
then
realized I couldn't drive 10
I
years
silently
ago. Breathed a sigh of relief. Toward Lin
I
Kinks.
seemed to
have an inexplicable anxiety. I called Fan Fan, who was staring wistfully out
I
the
had
window,
prepared a birthday
hoping to
lunch.
make up for
Gifts,
neglecting her
no matter
previous
how
birthdays.
sensible.
Fan
She
Fan
soon
was still
became
a child
immersed
in the joy of new toys. When Lin Kinks entered, Fan Fan and I were playing with a remote
have to
control
say,
car. Toys made 10 years later were really exquisite. "Daddy, it's my turn to drive. You said just one lap, little girl. Daddy will give it
We
to you after
instinctively
this
looked
round."
towards the door
Outside
when we
was
heard
a
it open.
torrential downpour. Lin Kinks emerged from the wind and rain, her lady's suit half soaked. Mom, Fan
Lin
Fan
Kinks
excitedly
caressed
ran
Fan
over.
Fan's little
Our
face,
eyes met
then
across
looked
the
up at me.
space. I felt like an awkward
Not
teenager,
knowing what
to do with my hands
But Lin
and
Kinks
feet. leaned in and whispered in my ear, "I missed
that
you so
moment,
much." I could no longer hold
and
back.
embraced
her tightly. "Lin Kinks, I missed
you
Even if I
too."
hadn't time traveled, it had been almost 3
Since
years
I
last saw Lin Kinks. I have to admit, time treats
The
beauties
decade had not
especially
diminished
well. Lin Kinks' beauty at
but
all, rather added a mature charm to her. She was still that dazzling beauty. I stammered a greeting to her. Instead of removing her wet coat, she came straight up and embraced me. A fragrance enveloped making my face flush red. In those 10 years, time had not looked down on Lin Kinks' beauty at all. Instead, it had added a mature charm to her. She was still that dazzling Lin Kinks, the gorgeous beauty radiating elegance. I stammered a greeting to her awkwardly. Instead of removing her wet coat, she came straight up and embraced me tightly. Her fragrance enveloped me, making my face flush red. I was like an awkward teenager, not knowing what to do. But Lin Kinks whispered in my ear, "I missed you so much." At that moment, I could no longer hold back and hugged her back tightly. "Lin Kinks, I missed you too."